morning. I'd like to call the budget workshop to order for July 15th, 2019. I want to welcome everybody here today. We'll begin our workshop with the invocation given by Commissioner Buddy Goddard, and then the pledge led by Commissioner Jeff Rawls. Please stand.
If you don't mind bowing your heads, please. Lord, thank you so much for being a part of our county, our country. We just ask that you help us to think about our blessings that we have, but to bless those others around us, to make good decisions that take care of the people of our county and honor you, Lord. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rawls and Commissioner Goddard. Okay, Matt and Stacy, I know that at the end of our meeting, we're going to come up with some different figures for, I guess, with budget and then also with the Better Place plan. So I didn't know where you wanted to start this morning.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Papel did all of the heavy lifting last week to go back and make adjustments to the budget. So I'll have her kind of go over some changes that she did. But we handed out this morning a single sheet which shows revenue and expenditure summary for next year. This is what the commission will see next Tuesday as the tentative budget, which comes along. Yeah, we have to change the date. It's okay. This is the single sheet that the commission will see next Tuesday on the agenda when we discuss setting the maximum millage rate. This gives an overview of the all of the fund numbers as well as the descriptions of each fund, and it includes the revenues, cash balance forward, transfers in, as well as expenditures and reserves and transfers out. So this is what the commission will see next week. This shows the commission that all of the funds are balanced as presented. We did go back and make some changes based on the guidance that we received from the commission. Stacy, would you like to add anything to what you prepared on the one-page sheet before we start discussing changes to Better Place?
Just pointing out that the one column is total revenues inclusive of everything. Then it just breaks out transfers in and cash forward for informational purposes. Then you have all of the expenditures, which includes everything, transfers, reserves, and then transfers and reserves broken out. So that, just to make sure that's clear.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any questions? Commissioner Rawls?
The 126,596, does that I assume that includes the pay raises we discussed?
It does. The budget you see before you now includes the 8% and 2% out of recurring funds. It includes a $500 per employee bonus out of surplus funds, reserve funds.
That's the 160,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
It includes changes that you have directed to be made to BPP. And as we go through fund by fund, we'll highlight the things that we think are important to you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Turner?
I don't know that I need to go back through fund by fund unless somebody else here does. I would like to look at it. We kind of did that last week, and if everything's incorporated that was in the discussions last week, then I'm okay as of so far with it. I know that you were probably working on this morning at 7:30, which is why we didn't get it yesterday afternoon as an email or over the weekend or something, where we could have studied it a little more. But the question I would have is in your reserves, I see that it's a lot of different reserves. On the top line reserves over to the right, how much of that reserve is unrestricted?
That 9 113,110 is 4.9 in a restricted reserve covering our reserve requirement. 110,142 belonging to the clerk from a backcasting settlement, and 4,102,968 in a general reserve that can be discussed at future workshops.
So 4.1, not 9.1 is what we actually
Correct.
have that we can spend if we need to
Yes,
for
sir.
emergencies.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And you, if I understood correctly, everything that we discussed last week, the different changes and moving the trucks around and what have you, has all been pretty much put in here. And the stuff that was, I'm trying not to get into the better place yet, but the stuff that was on the better place list, that is now incorporated into this stuff that was necessary. It's not. Did we just drop it?
Those we just took out of Better Place, and we haven't placed them back in the other funds yet, but these reserves that are shown over in that far right column in each of those funds can be used. For example, Transportation Fund has 1.1 million. That can be used for whatever is deemed to be the highest priority for transportation. You know, each fund, going down that list, it shows that the reserves that they do have available for the capital outlay needs for each of those.
Well, like I said, I'm not trying to discuss Better Place yet, but the things that were on that list, you're saying that none of them have been reincorporated into it. Well, there was a few items there that have to be done. You know, there's just, but we were talking about funding them from a different source is what part of the discussion was last week. So are we gonna try to do that at a later time and just bring them back in? For instance, like the dump truck, we've got to buy at least one dump truck a year, or we're gonna be in sad shape. So, and I think one got wrecked this year, or burnt down in the fire or something, so this year it may be a 2 dump truck year, but we've got the $1.1 million in the Public Works Reserve over there that we didn't, I guess, realize, I didn't realize we had until this year, so I guess we can spend part of that on that. About the only thing on the list, and the $250,000 that we needed to fix the sheriff's department, the sheriff's office out there, we had discussed a little bit about that, and this isn't
That
a
is
port
in the
meeting,
port.
but can we spend port money on that? And we had, and I think everybody shook their head we could, and so.
It's in there.
It's in there.
We
Yeah,
So
that's
did
in there.
include those two, the 200,000 for Project Play as previously discussed at a different workshop, as well as the 250,000 for the Sheriff's Office jail improvements. That is included in the Port Authority Fund now, yes.
We could start out talking about future meetings. After we present the budget to you next week, we anticipate needing a future workshop to discuss any of the necessary capital items that you would like to see incorporated out of reserves into the budget prior to us presenting it in September. And we also plan on presenting the budget to the Port Authority, the port's budget to the Port Authority in August.
Okay, but, and that would be included at that time in next year's budget for the port. Okay.
Although we do have Project Play and the sheriff's money in what you're seeing right now for the port.
Well, right now, I think it's still it's still kind of up in the air what we're gonna do out there. I mean, I think, well, at the last workshop, I think Commissioner Rawls brought in a different design than was originally brought in. So I think it's kind of still up in the air. I don't know
Correct.
if splash pads are included yet. This commissioner thinks that should be, that we need to try to find the money to put in a splash pad. So once we get there, I guess we could talk about it then, as long as we have the money in there.
That's on the agenda for tomorrow.
What's that, sir?
It's on for tomorrow.
Project
Tomorrow
Play
morning.
is, yeah, I believe.
Okay. And the workshop tomorrow, is it on the regular agenda? Workshop
Correct,
tomorrow?
workshop tomorrow.
Okay,
They're
good.
coming in, I guess. to make a presentation.
Fortunately, this is just the first tentative plan that we're statutorily required to present to you. And then we have plenty of opportunity to update it in August. And then, of course, we have to pass it in the 2 evening public hearings in September. Then as things evolve during the year, you see lots of budget amendments from me.
Yeah, that's fine. The other thing is, we had, as a commission, had discussed, at the last week's meeting about, we're gonna have to give, the supervisor of elections, increase in his budget because it's an election year. Is that increase built in here yet?
The supervisor of elections extra $100,000 is included. The excess over the current fiscal year for the other constitutionals is not included in the budget.
Right. Okay, I think that's good for now, Mr. Chairman.
That's all other constitutional officers, no increase.
No increase.
Okay. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt and Stacy, I can't find under the Enterprise Fund 405, on our sheet right here, we have $1.2 million in reserve, but I don't, where's that located on this one-page sheet?
So it's 405?
The Enterprise 405 fund on this sheet does not currently include all potential reserves that that fund has, because I need to take the time to sit down and forecast what their ending unrestricted fund balance will be. And in enterprise funds, a lot of the budgetary accounting things that happen have to be backed out because you capitalize, your capital outlay hits the balance sheet. It doesn't hit, I'm not saying this well. It's complicated. And I haven't sat down and forecast how much unrestricted will be available. I have in the port fund, but I have not in the sanitation fund, and I have not in the utility fund, because
reason-
it's a long exercise.
I got that.
Yeah.
The reason I asked is we saw it here on this sheet, but it didn't transfer over, and that was a concern of mine. And following up on Commissioner Turner's question, if we have 4.1, we might have 800 to 1.2 million sitting there in that fund that could be spent in there, is what I'm trying to say. Is that correct? Or somewhere, there's going to be a number there somewhere.
Correct, and that, when we can discuss that more, as Mrs. Papel mentioned, we envision coming and having a workshop in August to discuss other capital needs, and once we've had a chance to go back and sit down with department heads and really narrow down the capital list and
Okay.
come back to the
What's
board.
going to carry over and
Yes,
what's not going to
correct.
carry over.
We'll have a better idea as we sit down and go through August and it gets closer to September.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
I got one.
We're pulling money at a better place at some point for the water tower. Is that,
We took that out based upon the discussions that we received. If we want to discuss the better place list, we can move to that now, and we'll give a brief update of what we included. We handed out this morning an updated better place. Commissioner Harvey has a question.
Harvey?
Before we go to better place,
Okay.
I do have a comment. So if we're going to go there, are we headed in that direction?
We're
yeah,
at the
that-
will of the board.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, I know all the constitutional officers are important to this county, and since we've been presented the budgets, Tim Parker's budget, the property appraiser, is the gentleman who brings us, or person, the department that brings us the first line of offense, if you will, that does the math, that does all the numbers, that gets everything straight. And I really would like for us to look at if that 38,000 that he requested would not bring us back a return on investment. Don't know if it will. I'd like to hear more from him on that when that time comes, but I did want to at least go out there and say, you know, I was in sales. You don't cut your sales staff because that brings in revenue. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I think we need to look at that going into the future. If the 38,000 can produce to the county money back, then I think we need to look at that strongly. That's not a question or answer I'm ready to have right now. Mr. Parker's not here, but that was just on my radar. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. When would that happen? Would he come back in the August meeting or at a workshop to?
If it's the will of the commission, we could have Mr. Parker come to another workshop in August to discuss that, and we could receive consensus from the commission as a whole at that time, if that's the will of the commission.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioner Turner?
My only concern would be if we start, supervisor of election had to have the money this year. They dropped their budget this year because it was a non-election year. Next year it has to go up because they got to have it or we're not gonna have an election. So I have to look at that one a little different. The other constitutionals, if we start picking, you get one and you get one, but you don't get yours over there, I understand your position, but I think we've got to be as fair about it as we possibly can. And if one certain department feels like it's gonna be tremendously detrimental to their being able to have operations, then I think they need to come in here and tell us what part of that budget is going to be tremendously detrimental to them being able to do their job, and we can handle it in the future, but it's gonna have to be handled off of reserves, or it's gonna have to be handled through a different funding source or something. I just don't think we can sit up here and start picking and choosing which constitutionals get the budget increase they asked for when we just basically asked them all to hold at what they were last year for a year. Like I said, I'm absolutely open to any constitutional officer and I know they do important jobs, but I'm open to any one of them that feels like they'd like to come in here and tell us, by not getting something, how detrimental it would be to their department not to get that portion of it or something. And then we'll just have to see if we can help or do something or whatever at that point. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that all constitutional officers got all the money last year, and we had almost double last year increase in our budget than what we had this year, and almost they got it all. We didn't get any. That's why we're trying this year to fix some things that's been needing fixing around here, and then next year maybe we can go back to a sharing thing in the future where we're all getting a piece of the pie or whatever, but I think this is the county's year. Last year was their year, and they all got pretty hefty increases last year. The county cut their budget. So anyhow, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other?
If I could.
Mr. Rawls?
I agree with Mr. Turner, but
Who gets the gold star?
it was followed with a but. The sheriff's department has got some really quirky things they have to deal with. And, when I was talking with Colonel Wells the other day after the public safety meeting, when you start talking about what we pay for medications and health care for the prisoners, that's an uncontrolled budget they have. They're required to do that. So I think we owe it to them to at least let them come in and explain what their true needs are and really consider that heavily. We do have the money in the reserves to fund that. It's not recurrent money, understand. At some point, in order for us to fix their problem, we're gonna have to help fix their problem on our end by having a community that's personally accountable and that doesn't turn to drugs and maybe turns to a job or has a healthier lifestyle. But right now, they're in a pretty tenuous situation with what they have to pay for. They are changing healthcare providers, which will save money, but then they're gonna go to a 24-hour day service instead of 18 hours, I believe they have, 17 or 18. And by doing that, it's gonna cost more money, but they think they'll recoup it on the back end by not having to take a prisoner to the emergency room late at night and have a deputy stay with them. So there's plus and minuses, but they've got to have the money to try it. And maybe this is like Mr. Harvey said, this is an investment, and next year they come back and say we can hold the line, but they've got to do something.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Turner?
I also agree that 2 stars.
Yeah.
I also agree in theory, but even the sheriff's department, no matter how much money we could give them, they're gonna need more to do a better job. I understand that. And it may be that we do have to help them some, But I also know that usually, it may not happen this year, but usually the sheriff's department's able to return money to us at the end of the year from all the funds together, maybe not from the medical portion of it, but from all funds. You know, it may be that when they return that this year, that we have to turn around and give it right back to them to help them in next year's budget with the medical. Not real sure at this point, but for this portion of the budget, I think we've just got to hold it tight, and then if it turns out we've got to help them some next year because their medical spiraled out of control, that could happen even if we gave them the whole budget increase we gave to them. If their medical got too far out of control, they'd still have to come back. So I guess at this point, I'm trying to just make is that maybe what we need to do is just ask them to hold it best they can, and then if we have to come back and deal with it at a later date, we'll just have to deal with it then. That's the only thing I'm saying, I guess.
That's reasonable.
Okay. All right, what about having them come before us if they can't hold it? I guess you're saying just to hold it best you can, and then we have the reserves to fund them later on with particular requests? Is that what you're
Right,
talking about?
that's kind of what I'm saying, is go with the budget kind of like it's being presented now with no raises, and then if they need to come back to us, we can always make adjustments to the budget between now and when the budget's passed. We just can't go up on how much the millage rate is gonna be,
Correct.
basically. So this is still a moving document,
Right.
and it still will be all the way through September,
correct.
when it's finally approved at the second night meeting. And so, if it turns out even after the budget year, we've got reserves at the end of the year, most of the constitutional officers have returned money to us historically, so maybe we can take the money that they would normally return to the county at the end of the year and help them fund some of these other issues they may have with that return funds. So, like I said, I think this is a living, breathing document. Even when it passes next year, it's gonna be all year long. Every meeting we have changes to it, so it's a living document as we go. I think as a starting place, we're pretty much there, it looks to me like.
Gentlemen, I have been in jurisdictions, have worked in jurisdictions where the constitutional officers, out of necessity, have had to come back to the Board of County Commissioners during the year and say, this has happened, and we need some money.
Okay, I'm good. We're good with that?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. You want to move to Better Place?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Before we do, if I can
Okay.
say one more thing, something else this board could do is change the way we spend money and procure things as well. You know, we're looking at spending $122 million. Every dollar that we save could potentially be used for something like the Sheriff's Department or the Clerk of Courts. So it just, and I know that Ms. Young is working on a new procurement policy, but I think the sooner we get to that and the more creativity we can put into that and stay within the confines of the law, I think it's nothing but better for the taxpayers and for us.
One comment along those lines, while I certainly don't disagree with that statement at all, I'm for saving money as much as the next guy is. What we've got to be careful with is that our procurement policy also, we need to make sure that it's not open for possible fraud. I'm not saying anything or making any accusations or anything else, but if you're not careful, you can make it easier to do things, but then open it wider up for misuse. And so that's what we've got to balance in here when we redo the procurement policy, is have something in there where it's not ripe for misuse in later years down the road.
One of the things that I had in mind, if you don't mind, is trying to find a way to fund a full-time position that would be a contract manager, but a boots-on-the-ground contract manager, something along the lines of what Mr. Turner and I do for a living, which is actually going out and having somebody that can take on a small project from the county's perspective and not have to have all the design professionals up front. But, you know, having this kind of person on board would save tremendous amounts of money. And I spent quite a bit of time this weekend looking at floor plans, believe it or not, online for animal shelters. And
Me too.
Okay, there's lots of them. There's lots of them, and they're very simple.
I'm bringing one tomorrow.
I got a whole file already started. But, and then I was thinking, you know, how do you build this without having a $100,000 design fee up front? And you know, you go to a metal building provider and they give you a pre-engineered metal building, but you still have to have somebody, an engineer that, not on staff at this point, that you can go to that can do an architecture review, make sure that the life safety code is applied and that everything is conforms to Florida Building Code. And after that, you're out of the gate. You can hire who you want, manage your own project, and not have all the overhead expenses on small projects like that. You know, you could take that $750,000 building and turn it into a $1.5 million building real quick, or you can build it for $750,000 or less. So just something to think about as we're moving forward.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Matt?
Okay, moving on to the updated Better Place tentative projects list. Handed this out to all the commissioners. What we did to get to 60% dirt to pave, and that's 60% of the annual revenues that we're receiving, the 6.1 million. 60% is 3.66 million, and so dirt to pave was increased to that amount. The other projects that we have left in is the $750,000 for the animal services facility, the $580,000 for the Seminole Tower replacement, as well as the set aside for $1 million for phase 3. We did leave that in. One other project that we've added back after we went through and we reviewed different carry forward is $200,000 for Georgetown Park. We had $250,000 in this current year budget. We've spent right under $50,000 on the playground equipment that is out there now. As we've talked about it at other workshops, there are still other improvements in that master plan, so we're going to carry forward that $200,000 for that project as well. The three projects at the bottom is the debt service that has not changed, the jail facility, as well as the two set-asides of $550,000 for the utility system. Also, after we did go through and look at other carry forwards and we took other projects out, the contingency / reserves at the bottom is almost 1.3 million. So it's 1,288,000. So there is more funding in Better Place that could be allocated. Just staff would recommend that we set aside several $100,000 in contingency and reserves for other anticipated projects and things like emergency drainage repairs and whatnot that like we've seen this year that have occurred. So.
Okay.
He can
Question?
go for- He really had it
I don't
down.
really care. Don't matter to me.
Go ahead, sir. You
I
had
don't
your
want to
hand
steal your thunder. Sound
You're
like
not.
you got some.
We'll start with
He was down
Commissioner
there
Turner.
waving,
That
he was
loud.
down there waving his hands.
It's not that loud of a thunder, I promise.
Commissioner Turner, we'll start with you.
So the 200,000 for the Georgetown Park, we had discussed in a workshop, taking the boat ramp fishing fund money and possibly putting that, this is in addition to the money that's in the fishing fund, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Fishing fund has, let's see,
175,000 undesignated
278.
project plus
278.
278 in reserves that can be
Okay.
spent.
The reason I asked
About
that is
450.
we had, in that same workshop, we had discussed budgeting money to hire a subcontractor to go and maintain the boat ramps without taking the money out of the fishing fund. Is
Correct.
that budgeted in this budget?
We can go through the line item for Parks and Rec, but I do believe we included an increase for that out of general fund, not out of fishing fund.
I understand,
Yes.
but I'm gonna have to talk about some of these things together as we go. It's not completely separate. So you think that's in there?
Yes, sir, and we'll double check that before September.
Okay. Yeah, if you would, just to make sure, because I think we had discussed that and all agreed in a workshop that we were gonna try and fund the maintenance at the boat ramps, the cleanup and the mowing and the whatever. We were gonna try to get a contractor to do all the county boat ramps without funding it out of the fishing fund monies. That way we could take that money and try to put it towards a boat ramp that I thought was gonna go, or we were at least looking at possibly putting that boat ramp down at the Georgetown Park. And we'd have another 200 to go along with it. Is this 200 for what? Bathrooms? Because they already got a pavilion and they already got
They have a small pavilion, but I don't believe anything's been done for parking or
Nothing's done, no.
access.
There still needs, the playground equipment is installed, the
Right.
pavilion and the handicap parking, that's to come. We still have to finish, you know, the entrance, the driveway, and parking, but nothing else has been done at all, so.
What we have to be careful of on the fishing fund monies is that is restricted for certain purposes like boat ramps and whatnot. So if there are other improvements that need to be done that the fishing fund money may not be able to be used on, this would be the
Yeah, I get it.
allocation for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I get it. No, that's fine. I'm not asking to take it out. I'm just wanting to make sure that we're still on course for the other discussion we had, which
Yes, sir.
included the fishing fund along with it, as for maybe a real boat ramp down there.
Right, and that's definitely what is needed there. It just needs a couple bathrooms, a boat ramp, and some parking. That's it. Matt, do you think you could research if the rec budget was funded for the maintenance of the boat ramps? Because they're coming, the Fish Advisory Fund Committee they're coming to our workshop tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's probably going to be one of the topics they want to discuss, so. Okay,
If I
Commissioner
could real
Austin.
quick, at the Waterways and Trails meeting, Bob Bernstein raised a question about eelgrass along the river in Georgetown, and said that that's a protected species, and questioned whether or not we could even put a hard landing in there. I don't know anything about it. I'm not a
The
eelgrass
one
guy.
thing that I've figured out, Commissioner, since I've been here, is there ain't a damn thing you can do that ain't gonna make someone upset.
Well, he just-
You
he
know,
just raised it.
I'm sorry his eelgrass is gonna get damaged at the end of these two nice new boat ramps. I really am, but, well,
I just wanted to bring that, because he raised a
No,
question.
I
I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't know
I
anything about eelgrass.
understand, but,
You're correct, that's a touchy subject. 'Cause when I was putting my dock in, she said, why do you want to go, one of the agents said, why do you want to go so far out in the water? I said, I want to get past the eelgrass. She goes, ooh, eelgrass, I said, excuse me, they're bonnets. So we'll call them bonnets right now, and it went right off through. But yeah, there's going to have to be some type of inspections to see, because there's wetlands on this
Correct.
property.
Yep.
And so a lot of stuff's going to have to go in there to see if it actually can put it there, but I don't see why we couldn't.
Yeah, there's going to need to be more of an assessment done, and we'll start on that process, of course, but just in the budget, we will have allocated money to do that. But, of course, we'll be bringing that back to the commission as we look into it.
at the risk of getting off subject, and I'm really trying not to do that, where we maybe can get out of here before dark. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that was a little facetious.
Big word.
Going to jail.
On the hell. I'll just hold off on that discussion for another time. It's not budget relevant.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say I applaud the board for the dirt to pavement, but I really think we need to look at that. I like the 60% of BPP. I don't want to tie ourselves to dirt to pavement, and I'll tell you why. I do think we should tie ourselves to roads. I'll say that right off the bat. But we got some double chip seal roads that are out there that were put down in 2012 that we're patching right now that probably need an overlay before we lose the whole base of that. That's what kind of happened with Strickland Road, if you remember. There was some other problems there, but we really need to look at that. And then the resurfacing of roads. We have a lot of roads in this county that need resurfacing. And, you know, I just think that with $1 million a year coming out of the gas tax for resurfacing, and we know that fund is dwindling, I think when we talk about roads, I think it can all fit in that 60% plan, because I don't want to go out there and do a lot of dirt to pave. Although I want to pay, I'd love to do all the roads in the county. Let me share that. But that's unrealistic to the roads that we currently have that are old, and we're not going to have a plan for that. So I just want to throw that out there. If the board decides to leave it as dirt to pave, that's the wording, fine. If we want to just say pavement management, if we want to say roads, all inclusive, I'm good with that too. I just think there has to be a plan of action to deal with the known double chip seal roads that we know we've got out there that are failing, and the resurfacing of roads that are also going to catch up with us the more we pave roads as we go. Press, am I speaking out of turn there? I didn't share that with you before that today, but do you want to make any comments about that? Are you good? I'm good. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Turner, do you have a?
Yes,
Okay, press, you want to come back up and repeat that?
oh, it wasn't nothing groundbreaking that you missed. He said he agreed with Commissioner Harvey.
Okay, thank you.
So,
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
now y'all got me flustered. I agree, but I think we need to leave part of it explicitly for dirt to pave, that it's got to be done. That's what the deal is. If we need to take some more, as we get more paved roads, we're gonna need more, and the gas tax is dwindling, which is what we use for, resurfacing roads. We're gonna need to do more resurfacing in order to do it. And now that we're doing about half of our roads every year with a double chip seal, they're not gonna last as long and need more attention down the road, so I'm not so sure that we don't need to put 2 line items in there, that we need to change it back to 2 million or 2.5 million to dirt to pave. That has to be dirt to pave, and the other $1 million of it or something would be whatever's necessary to either help these old roads or augment the service. I mean, the gas tax, or, you know, something other than just dirt to pave, because I think we've gotten to the point we've got to start maintaining some of these other roads and not just dirt to pave, so with the gas taxes dwindling. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Rawls?
You know, last week we talked about possible revenue sources, and I think it's important to bring up the fact that the 1% tax is not in perpetuity. It will expire. It has a date certain. It does not have to be renewed by the taxpayers. So maintaining roads that were put in with or without BPP money and expecting to maintain them in perpetuity with or without BPP money may not be possible, especially without. But we're fixing to spend $2.25 million, I believe, on indigent care reimbursement for Medicaid.
Altogether within that department, yes, that's
And
accurate, a little over 2 million.
if we were bringing in $3.5 million, we could offset that with that, which is a direct impact to the plus on the general fund of $3.5 million, correct?
Approximately, we haven't,
Or plus or minus,
Mrs.
yeah, $3
Papel and I
million,
haven't,
yeah.
approximately 3.5,
So-
3.75.
You know, as distasteful as it may seem or sound, at some point, we're gonna have to get to a point where we find other funding sources. It's not gonna come riding in on a big grant horse. It's gonna have to come from the local citizens right now. Until this county starts to grow enough, we need to fund. We can always unring the bell, but there is a $3.5 potential million add to the general fund, which would alleviate some of the conversation we're having. We're talking about spending $3.6 million in a better place. So just food for thought. That's all that is, just food for thought. Last time it didn't seem to get a very warm reception, but I really feel like we need to start looking at other forms of revenue besides ad valorem.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Any other?
Yes, there's several
Okay.
things I would like to go through to get
Okay.
into the record. And I emailed them all to Matt on Saturday just in case. So I'm glancing through my paperwork here.
Go to your sent email.
No, I printed it.
Old school.
Status quo millage rate of 9.5946 in the general fund, 1.1 in the fire tax fund. The only capital outlay budgeted in the general fund would be carryover funding that the health department just plans to use for something capital. The $100,000 promised towards the Melrose pardon?
Melrose Library.
Yeah, Melrose Library project, and the $20,000 for capital library acquisitions that Matt told you about. It does include 1.35 of reserves being transferred into the insurance fund. I've already told you how the reserves are broken down. Oh, also, we told you,
Stacy,
Stacy.
sir,
but if we vote not to go self-insured, then that 1.3 million will
Comes
stay where it
back.
is.
Correct.
comes back.
Yes, sir.
We're just anticipating that you will.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, Stacy.
since we
Commissioner
stopped
Harvey?
her for a moment, you said the Melrose $100,000 library. I hope the board knows that they did not get that grant and, for their improvements that they wanted from the state. But I did see, I sent an email back basically telling staff that that request should come back before the board if they want to carry it over. It's not an automatic carryover.
They did not get the grant, but they have.
Have money.
The money.
Yeah.
They have 125,000 to put with this 100,000.
Right.
I thought they were doing that.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a different project than the
Okay.
grant. What they applied
Yes.
for on the grant was actually building quite a bit larger expansion. This 100,000 is for the roof replacement, because the roof is the original roof, and they do have 125,000 to put to a small expansion. They already have a slab, it's 500 square feet, so that's
This,
correct.
this is in process. They just haven't handed us
Yeah,
the
my
125
point was
yet.
this, though, you know, when the board, and I'm gonna speak for future boards too, when we go out there and apply for money, and we'll put some money up and you're unsuccessful, that money just automatically doesn't stay there. It comes back to the board for a future decision by a future board if you want to go back out for it. I didn't want it to be known as automatic, oh, we got it this time, let's do it again and again and again. No, you can't. I don't want to bind us. Be moving. It might be might not be library, it might be something else. And we just need to fund that at that point instead of that. That's all I was trying to get to
Correct.
at that point.
Yes, sir. Regarding the compensation increases, just for clarity, that is not slated for October 1st. It is slated for the first paycheck where every day the employees worked were in the month of October. So it really will be October 18th paycheck when that happens, because you get paid a week later.
What is the effect of that on the budget?
If we paid earlier, it would affect this year's budget.
Correct, it'd have to be accrued back into this fiscal year.
Okay.
And the
When do they get their $500?
that, we haven't picked a specific date yet. We're having HR look at the workload impact, but we're planning it to be a paycheck in
November?
early November.
Correct.
Mid November?
Before the holidays.
Yeah.
In November? Okay.
So that way, I just wanted to get that into the record so nobody would be thinking October 1st. We talked about the transportation fund, we talked about the fishing fund, the fire tax fund, 1.1, no budgeted capital outlay, and 444.77 in a general reserve that can be discussed later. I'm not planning on going fund by fund through the rest of the funds, but we had told you at one point that the 212 MSBU debt service fund was going away. Susan Frank has made a discovery that we'll have to keep it another year. Another change that you may see between now and September is the 603 and 606 funds, those small special revenue utility funds, may be absorbed
Closed out.
into the 405 fund. We're researching the logistics of that, and we're not there yet. Right now, the roads project fund, the capital gas tax, has $1 million in new resurfacing and $1.142 million in a reserve. I'm watching that reserve because there's a lot of moving parts in that fund, and we may recommend to you putting more towards resurfacing in September when a few grants are closed out, the GP project is closed out, the money's closed off, and I know how much of that fund balance is really gas tax.
That million's in addition to the other public works million?
Yes, sir. But it must be used for capital.
Well, that won't be a problem.
Yeah.
That would effectively increase your resurfacing budget for next year as well.
Yes.
by
So
quite a
that'll
bit.
carry forward.
And I
Correct.
have
1 year.
carefully forecast the Port Authority unrestricted reserves for next year, but I still have to do it for the Waste Management Fund and the Utility Fund, and I told you that. And those are the things I wanted to get into the record.
I got a question.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Rawls?
On the Port Authority, you're at 1.1. What is the 6 million? You get 600,000, 640,000. I know we set aside 200,000 for the Project Play, and there's 150 for something else. What drove it down 600?
The expenditures of 1.768 million include the reserves of 1.1. It's the differences in expenditures is the 250 and the 200 for, and we can get the further detail on what the other differences are in the port fund.
Because there's a $250,000 question mark in my mind.
There's 175,000 in operating expenditures. That includes depreciation, so that's probably why it's appearing that way.
Depreciation on what?
On the assets that the port owns.
Well, we had $1,750,000 cash, and then we're depreciating the cash?
Well, there was a loss on sale, and
Right.
then when I,
But it doesn't change the fact that the loss is a paper loss. We had $1,043,000, if I remember correctly, and then we sold the building for $750,000, so that's 1.7543, and now we're at 1.139.
part of the change is restricted and unrestricted fund balance.
So is there other balance that's not reflected here in the Port Authority fund?
I don't understand the question.
All right, this simple math. Where do we spend the money? Or where are we allocated the money? Your $640,000 difference, plus or minus. I'm just trying to figure out how we got there.
I
I'm
think
looking
he's
at the
asking,
detail
would
right
you
now.
go over that fund, if you have the paperwork, will you to go over that particular fund balance?
We have 175,000 in operating expenditures. Hang on, let
And
me-
what will
let me
that go
sort it.
towards?
Let me sort so I can get the detail more readily accessible. We have 175 in operating expenditures. We have 450 in capital, and then other uses and reserves is the 1,139,000 that's shown here. Those add up to 1,768,000. Under the operating, the 175, the actual cost is 39,000 in insurance, 2,700 accounting and auditing, 2,200 other contractual services, 20,000 in repair and maintenance, 12,000 for utilities, and another 2,800 for utility services. Like I said, the depreciation is shown there as 96,317.
But the depreciation would affect the overall because we're not depreciating the cash, only the assets.
Correct, but when it is budgeted for, it shows as a decrease, but what will effectively happen because it's not being spent is it will be added back to the reserves at the end of the year.
Okay, so unencumbered, what are we looking at?
I believe that is the unrestricted.
I conservatively forecast at this point the unrestricted fund balance at the end of this year to be 1.7.
Okay.
It's a conservative. I could conceivably increase that between now and September, but I'm going on forecasted revenues and forecasted expenditures in that fund, and I can't not be conservative in July, because I don't want to face you in September and say, by the way, it's going to be substantively less.
It
be
wasn't
more.
much more than
It can be more,
1.7 million. We looked at it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
You need anything from us today as far as a vote to move forward, or just that we're done talking, let's go home?
I believe that is it, sir. The-
Unless you object, this is what you're going to see
Next
next
Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, and we'll approve it then.
I do have one
Okay.
question regarding this, and it's just been eating at me since last week. The communications equipment towers and all that we're getting, we got about a $5 million plus or minus obligation we're facing. Is there no way to pay for that over time and not hit ourselves so hard right now?
Absolutely, and like we discussed in the Better Place, we've set aside $1 million to look at funding that project. Absolutely.
What is the longevity of that communications equipment estimated to be?
Well, the largest portion of that 4.4 to 5.5 million is going to be the radios in the vehicles and the portables. Theoretically, those devices are, I would say, at least, hopefully, 5 to 7 years, hopefully longer than that, but some of them may not. Those are obviously going to have to be replaced, vehicles replaced, or if anything, portables are dropped, broken. If you were in the fire service, you understand they can be damaged and have to be replaced. So that's the largest portion of that project. The actual portion of the antennas going on the towers, that's maybe 20% of that total, 20 to 25% of that 4.4 to 5.5 million. So the majority of it is the actual devices that'll be in the vehicles and being worn on the side. So it would be financing those for some of them that might need to be replaced. You know, if we look at doing 10-year financing or 15-year financing, 20-year financing, anything like that, then we could be paying on things that are already
I was thinking 8 to
obsolete
10,
and phased out.
I'm just trying to find some relief.
Well, and it may be that the 1 million is highball. And if it is, if we are able to, say, get the
Correct.
project for 4.4, and we do a
10 years.
5-year
Or 7 years or
or
something like that.
whatever, not all of the million may be consumed.
In 7
And-
years, you'd be around $490,000 a year.
Correct, yep, and that's what we would be looking at, and as if we get final approval on that being included in the budget, of course, this is just a budgetary number. We'll have to come back to the board with more information in order to move forward on that project.
We could have had a good year with no emergencies. And you could say, put that whole million down so that we're financing less. Or we could have had a bad year with lots of emergencies, and you may say, only put 500 down.
Okay, Commissioner Turner?
You wanna go first
go
this
ahead,
time?
sir.
That's okay. If we were to try and get a loan like that, would that be a USDA RD thing, or would that go to a bank, or what would we do there, or is that too early to say?
That would be something that we would work on as staff, is looking at what the rates would be and what we would have to do in order to get USDA financing. Typically, they do a bond issue, so theirs is a little more complicated than doing just a typical bank note issue. Talking with a firm like PFM, that asset management and debt issuance that would come in and help us just doing a normal bank loan. And so we'll get information from,
So
say, the
short
private
the
sector.
short
We'll get
answer, to be
information from USDA.
determined.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's good enough, to be determined, Commissioner.
Try to give you as much information as
Yeah,
possible, sir.
I understand, brother, I understand. Let's see, did we apply for a grant for this money this year? I know we did last year, did we this year?
We've been looking at different grants. We've talked with USDA about the communication, and I believe they've pointed us in other directions. We're also going to talk with our federal lobbyist about looking at potential, I believe it's Department of Justice grants that might be applicable for it. We've
Did we
asked
for
several times on.
appropriation this year from the state and the federal? Did we ask for appropriations for this?
I don't believe we did on the state side, but on the federal side, this is one of the projects that when we went to Washington DC, we've talked with every agency that we could that would have potential funding about getting that done, and we have.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm missing in communication with you, Matt. Did
Just
we ask for a
appropriation.
federal or state appropriation to fund this?
Not on the state level. On the federal level, I will have to go back and double check. Last year, I believe we did.
Well, if this is
year,
as big an issue as what, I think Colonel Wells was the one that made the comment that this is a big safety issue, and I think Quinn may have too, that it's a big safety issue. If it's such a tremendous safety issue, wouldn't that be like right up front on trying to get a grant or a state appropriation or a federal appropriation? I think we need to be careful here and not pull the trigger too quick. I know the guys need it, I know that it's essential, but I've never heard of a grant or an appropriation that came and paid back what you've already done. Never heard of that before. So I don't know that we don't maybe need to go through that this year, try to get a state appropriation, try to get a federal appropriation, and then even if we could get the first year or the first year or two of it, half the money, then we could finance the rest of it and go ahead and do the thing. But before we take $5 million out of the Better Place plan, I'd like to try to make sure that we have done everything we can, exhausted every source, every federal and state appropriation, every grant, everything that we could do. And like I said, with this being a safety issue, like everybody's claiming it is, I just don't understand why it wouldn't be at the top of the list on trying to get federal or state money.
Absolutely, and that is something that we can do. Again, it's an allocation in next budget year. It doesn't mean that we're going to immediately start October 1 and go out and do all of that. The state budget, of course, starts next July 1. We can try again next state appropriation. We'll have an idea of whether it might be included or not, you know, March, April, May, in those timeframes. Of course, it wouldn't be finalized until July, but we can also try on the federal side. And
Well, it's my understanding, by listening to the guys that are dealing with this, that it's a life and death issue, that it's one of them deals that they don't have coverage in some areas in the county, that some of the tower equipment doesn't work. They can't talk to other counties because they've already switched over. So if that's the case, I just don't see how that wouldn't be the head of the list when you put on the appropriation. You're risking the lives of all our officers, firefighter, EMS people, everybody are risking their lives by not letting us talk on the radio here. So it seems to me like that would be way up the list for funding.
that is how we've been asking for funding since at least I've been at the county the past year to year and a half. I know that we've pursued it with just about every agency, and that is how we convey that to those agencies, and we haven't been fortunate yet. And I believe Quinn, correct me if I'm wrong, they've been trying for several fiscal years, even before I got to the county, to try to find the funding.
But I haven't seen it on the state appropriations list one time since the 2 years that I've been here.
Correct. Well, with it being the large amount that it is, it's going to be one of those where if we ask for that amount, then other appropriations may fall behind. But again, we can make that a top priority going into next fiscal year for the state and really push that appropriation.
But even if they funded the down payment for us, so you're talking about possibly $1 million, you know, and then and then take the rest of the money and finance it over 3 or 4 years at as low interest as you can find, or a bond issue, or whatever the case may be, and then it just makes perfect sense if you can get some of it. But if we, as soon as we flip the switch and make this happen, the funding is gone. You're not going to get any to repay what you've done. So I understand it's necessary. I'm not making light of that, Chief, that I understand this, Ned or Johnny. I'm not making light of this whatsoever. I know it's needed, but it's also $5 million. And so we need to try and figure out if truly the funding sources are exhausted. If they are, okay, that's one thing. If they're not, I don't know that we need to try one more time and see if we can't get the state to help at least fund the down payment or something.
Absolutely. Well, we will make that a top priority this year on both state and federal level, and we'll continue exhausting efforts at the federal level on trying to find funding.
Quinn, you have some comments, I'm sure.
Just real quick, we've each and every year since 2013, when the FCC did the rebanding that we talked about last meeting, where it cut our coverage in half basically, we've gone out, looked at everything. We started at a $15-20 million project, and we're whittling it down as we go to get the pieces and parts that we need. And we just I know the colonel, the sheriff, and I, and Johnny, we've all met with each and every one of our elected officials, both at the state and federal, for the last 6 years now, trying to get this, to that point. The state legislators did approve the $790,000 through the appropriation this year for the second phase, which is the 911 center upgrade that we had to do as part of the three-phase project, and we're down to the last phase, which is the $5 million process. We've just got to make sure that when this is done, we've covered and fixed the issues that we've got, which is where we're at. And certainly looking and trying, we're going to keep trying. I mean, that's not what I'm saying at all, but I do want you to know we've been trying, wholeheartedly, meeting after meeting, trying to do this for the last.
I know we've been trying to get grants ever since the little bit of time I've been here, but I haven't seen it on the appropriations. So I don't know that we shouldn't just go out and seek a straight appropriation for all or part of some of this. And then we'll just take it from there. Whatever we have to do, obviously we got to do something. But any money we can save, the better. I understand how important this is. I get it. But it's also very touchy that we're gonna take $5 million out of the Better Place plan that was not sold for communication towers. It was sold to pave roads. And we're gonna put it into a very important project of communication towers, but still that isn't how it was sold. So we need to exhaust all funding sources for sure before we do that. That's just my opinion.
Absolutely, we understand.
Okay, all right, thank you, Quinn. Commissioner Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quinn, don't leave yet. One good thing about these meetings being televised, we had a gentleman call last week, which prompted a meeting with Chief Romay. And I would encourage y'all, if you haven't seen the tower placements where they're at, there is communication breakdown in Putnam County. So it sparks the conversation of Quinn and I had the other day with Chief Romay, I'm sorry, about where to place these towers, where to get this equipment. But you mentioned something to me that you're already trying to replace equipment as it breaks down with the newer equipment that can talk once you get there. And I thought that was very innovative for you. So if you want to talk about that for a moment.
I plead the fifth. I'm sorry. No, as in communication, in particular in the ambulance arena, we have to communicate with hospitals. They're on a totally different band. So in buying the radios for the ambulance, when we replace an ambulance, we're getting the radio that not only will do what we need to do today, but will also cover the 800 megahertz bandwidth, because now the radios, you can get them in a multi-band scenario when you buy it the first time. It's very cost effective, if you will, so we're going ahead and planning ahead. The radios last 10 years plus, so, in the mobiles, unless there's some unforeseen thing, but just the general life of the radio. So we're trying to make sure that, what we're doing now is trying to look forward. We're doing one or two, but as we go along. And it brings to the point the bigger priority with the capital and fire trucks and ambulance. We've got to, continue to replace those, and there's a lot of capital needs out there, but for instance, the fire service, this will be the second year, if we don't do anything in this next budget year, that we've not bought any fire trucks. So I just
Yes, you did. Thank you.
I think, if I may, that comes down to strategic planning and long-term planning, and we've been discussing it since December. The University of North Florida has a team that can come in from the SBDC at no cost and provide facilitators for just strategic planning. And we're 8 months into my term, and it's still a conversation. So, I like to beat a dead horse if I get the opportunity. And this dead horse is we just done nothing. And everything we're talking about budgetary-wise will impact future commissions, and it will impact the citizens. But we could do it in a meaningful way where we bring the citizens to the table.
I'll say all the time that it's frustrating how slow government works. I feel your pain. Oh, gung ho, give them hell. I guarantee you. But I'm telling you, it's frustratingly slow. how it works, but I mean, we've
Well,
been
we
talking
could- we could-
strategic planning even before.
We could mandate
came in.
that the staff get to strategic planning and move it up on the to-do list. We have a fourth Tuesday we're not taking advantage of. We could start noodling out strategies. Fire and EMS is a huge conversation. It's gonna take weeks, if not months, to have the conversation just about how we're gonna move forward, whether it's gonna be volunteer, fully paid, a combination. I've got my opinions about it. I've got my professional opinions about it, but I can tell you that until we start having the conversation, stuff like this is just, it's gonna drip and drab, and it's gonna eat our lunch eventually. And then, one conversation we've yet to have is potential revenue from the landfill. I know you're working on bringing in more waste in the landfill and to develop revenue, and how do we get the revenue from the landfill once we earn it back into the general fund, and then back out on the street in the form of fire, EMS, sheriff, whatever.
Okay,
Strategic planning.
okay.
I do
thank you,
know that Mr. Suggs is working on that and has had conversations with people that work for the
facilitator,
Institute of Government with FSU, and they are,
FSU, very good. So we can go to FSU and do this.
well, the Institute of Government is part of
We could go there.
Florida State University. They'll be coming and looking at doing that. There was, the person that had been doing that for a long time is recently retiring, new person coming in, so I know Mr. Suggs has
I'll
been
waive
working
the
on that.
consensus.
Okay.
No, we're not waving like that. Sorry. Take
Okay.
that star away from you.
Both stars.
Right.
You just lost all your stars, Jeff.
Okay.
That was all we had. As we mentioned earlier, looking at doing a workshop sometime in August, as staff gets a chance to go back through all of the capital requests and look at what we can include using reserves in each of those funds.
Well,
Would-
before just building them in, would you just go ahead and bring them back to us where we don't have to hunt where you hit them? In case we want to fund them some way
Well,
differently?
yes, sir. That was the idea, is coming back and looking at a list of
Well,
like
I
the ones that we
understand
took out of
that's
Better
the
Place.
idea, But
Yes.
sometimes y'all just go ahead and build them in, and then we got to like find where you hit them like it's an Easter egg hunt. So it'd be a whole lot easier if you said, we'd like to fund this particular issue out of this fund, and that way we don't have to find them. We can say yes, no, or instead of that, let's fund it over here.
Absolutely, we understand. That's why we brought it, the budget presentation last Monday to you in that format was, the list of capital requests, and didn't include anything other than what was in Better Place. So
thank
absolutely understand. Looking at the schedule in August, would say Monday, August 12th work for the commission, or I don't think we've, August 20th is the third Tuesday. I don't think we have a workshop scheduled for the third Tuesday, but I know that the commission has been wanting to do third Tuesdays, and there may be other topics that may need to come up for that third Tuesday. Does the commission have a preference on either one of those dates?
What were they again?
August 12th is a Monday, and August 20th is the third Tuesday. But again, I didn't know if there were going to be some topics that might come up tomorrow or
Mr. Chairman,
meeting next week.
We have a BOCC workshop.
how long do we think,
Yeah,
may I ask,
Yeah,
it?
I
how long do you
20.
think that will take? Because if it's a third Tuesday, we could devote a couple hours in the morning to it. And then if we had other things, we could come back in the afternoon.
Absolutely, we can do that. I don't unless there's
Or the
a lot of discussion, I don't envision
Well,
it
We
taking
whittled
a
it
couple of
down from
hours.
an all day to noon, now we're hour and 10 minutes, and I think we beat this thing. I think we've got it, so.
Okay. Absolutely, we
Mr.
could look
Chairman,
at doing
I
that.
ask that we go to that August 20th and do it on that date.
Good, that was.
20th,
9
We're
o'clock?
here anyways.
9?
Here anyway,
9 o'clock?
or potentially be here.
Okay, 9,
So it'll just be a topic on your third Tuesday workshop.
okay.
Well, as Mr. Chairman, as far as the third Tuesday workshops, we can have them as long as we need them, but we don't need to start finding things to put in the third Tuesday workshop, so it just had gotten where we were getting behind by having only, first Tuesday, second Tuesday in the afternoon, we were getting behind. So, as soon as we catch up, and we don't need the third Tuesday anymore, then we're not, And this commissioner doesn't want to have workshops just to have another meeting. We need to have something substantial to have a workshop about.
I like having the meetings every week. I like being with you guys.
I'm sure you do, brother.
It makes me anxious when I'm not around you.
What's not to like, anyway? I mean, right?
Exactly.
That's how this meeting started off today.
Okay. All right, any other questions of staff? Okay. Quinn Remade wants to come up. He's got a request that he needs to try to get us to approve.
Why didn't he do it when he was up there a minute ago?
Wasn't sure everybody was through with all their questions.
We, last year, were very fortunate, Matt and I were able to go through WorkSource, or now CareerSource, to help start training some of our current EMTs as paramedics. Basically what happens is CareerSource has federal funding to enhance job skills and all that. We've capitalized on it. We sent 2 that are currently in paramedic school, and what I would like to be able to do is do that again this federal physical year. Just got the application Friday night late. We've got to turn it in by this Friday, I believe, is the deadline to get on this next schedule. So I just would like a consensus. Each paramedic class is a little over $6,000 per student. It's a huge expense for the individual, particularly somebody coming into the workforce. There are some stipulations that you have to work for the county for 6 months to apply and things like that. But the other thing that we're doing is we're asking them to sign a 2-year commitment that they're going to be with us for another 2 years after the class. We've got 3 or 4 more that are looking to go. They're just needing the financial help. It's a reimbursement thing. We get the money back through payments as we submit, as we get the bills, we submit them and so forth. So it's a win-win for us.
Yeah, do it. You
doesn't-
sold me. You ain't got to keep talking. You sold me.
You got it.
It costs 7.4.
You got the money in your budget?
It is fully reimbursed, so it's, yeah.
We'll just need the chairman's signature to
Well, if we need that, should we authorize
format.
it?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Sounds like a great program again. So, did the students, do they fund it themselves and then to get to the county, we're funding that, and
We
then we get
actually
reimbursed?
do a purchase order to the teaching institution, and then they send us a
These are
bill.
our employees that we're sending.
Yes,
Right.
current employees.
Correct.
And it's really no different than continuing education for other folks in other departments.
This is just something we were able to find that actually we get the money back, so it's a win-win, actually.
Okay,
Matt, do you need, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman? Do we need a
thank you, Quinn.
motion?
Do we need a motion on that, do you
Would
think?
it be cleaner if we did?
I think so,
I
because
think so.
staff does not have the authority. The one resolution that was passed just gives staff the authority to do grant reporting, but not the
That's
actual application.
$20,000, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's,
It's
$12,000.
6,000
You know,
plus.
okay, we can do a
per
vote,
person.
whatever makes you comfortable, but the administrator can sign something less than 25, and if it's over that, he can sign it, or the chairman can sign it up to 50, but if it'd make you more comfortable that we did a resolution, I'd move it.
Well,
I'll second.
it's the actual grant agreement, just giving staff approval to sign the grant agreement. And I think if there's a motion on that.
I second
yes.
it.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Turner and a second by Commissioner Harvey. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
I have one more thing, and I'll be bringing I just wanted to update the commission. I'll be bringing this to you guys tomorrow to walk on. Courtesy Transport has approached us about their need for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. This allows them to operate the BLS ambulance service here in Putnam County. It has expired, and the county has to give them the authority to do that. And so Chief Romay just gave me a copy of it. We'll do an agenda item. We'll bring it to you guys tomorrow so that you can take a look at it. And
Well, Quinn's
I'll
here
put
to
it
ask.
together and email it out to you this afternoon so that you have it and we can review it and get it approved for them.
While you're here, you were talking about putting a 9th unit on the road and running non-emergency transports. Is this going to conflict with that, or have you all?
Basically, what Courtesy's been doing is, they're working with the hospital and some other,
Yeah.
the local institutions on taking people home, things like that, that's something we can't do financially.
I know you were looking at getting a contract with the hospital, and
It's
it's different.
yes.
Okay.
And plus Courtesy's been very, very, accommodating and helpful, on various events. They've actually given us a truck to help, augment and enhance our thing. We had a traffic crash a couple of years ago involving a school bus. They were there, right there with us, so it's worked out.
I'll bring that back to you guys tomorrow. Like I said, we'll email it out, give you guys a day just to look over it, make sure, you guys are fine with it. We'll discuss it tomorrow.
Okay. Any other further business? Okay, we'll have Commissioner comments, closing comments. Commissioner Harvey?
I have
Mr.
none.
Turner?
1 hour, 17 minutes.
That's not bad, is it? So, okay, we have a 9 o'clock workshop tomorrow, and again, want to thank staff for all your work, and,
Tomorrow, isn't it? There's a workshop.
no, just 9 o'clock workshop. Yeah, so thank you for all your work, and we'll move this forward
Absolutely.
next Tuesday, okay? Seeing no further business, we stand adjourned.